Okay, I'll call this special regional council meeting to order. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually, is being streamed and recorded. Can I get a motion, please, to adopt the agenda? Moved by Councillor Roper, second by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. Administration report number 5. BC completed assessment role provided by BC Assessments. Speaking to the report is Ms. Tony Pike. Good evening, Ms. Pike.
Good evening. I had a few technical difficulties joining. Sorry about that. But we wanted to speak with you this evening about the assessment that we've received from BC Assessment and how it's got potential to impact our municipality. Now, if it is all right with council, I thought the easiest way is to work our way through the report itself, just part by part, if that works for everyone.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So at issue is, well, first of all, I need to start by saying BC Assessment controls how properties are assessed. And so it isn't until the end of December and then in April, end of March, that we find out what their work is and how it impacts us. So tonight we want to have a conversation around how the changes in taxable assessment within tax classes works and how it works with that tax assessment relative to other tax classes. And then sometimes within a tax class, for instance, in the residential tax class, there are shifts within. And so in the residential tax class, we'll get into the report and we'll see that there's strata, there's vacant, there's single family. And we have something called other, which relates to all of the residential accommodations that are in the gas fields. So all of those properties out there, and how they interact with one another, and how if you had the best roadmap in the world, it still wouldn't necessarily get you to the end result. So BC Assessment, when we talk about how BC Assessment changes assessment, they do two things. They change based on non-market adjustments. So that non-market, it doesn't relate to property sales. If you've got a home that has had major renovations, if you've had a property that had a home razed by fire and the assessment of that improvement was no longer on there. In some cases, there will be boundary changes. 2 lots might be combined into one, or there might be subdivisions that affect it. So all of those things are non-market changes. What's the biggest thing that we're seeing for Northern Rockies is the impact of the market changes. And this is how how property sales within the Northern Rockies relates to the assessment. And the BC Assessment identifies the value of your property at July 1st each year. So what we've got in 2022 is the value of the property as BC Assessment sees it at July 1st, 2021. They released a communication, BC Assessment released a communication just last week that indicated that during the pandemic, the real estate market has remained robust across the province, including higher demand throughout northern BC, which has resulted in higher 2022 assessment values for most homeowners in the region. And we'll get into it in the report. And what we've seen is we've seen some properties that have had increases in excess of 50 and 60% over 2021 assessment. So the first part of the analysis so is there anybody that wants to ask a question? I'll get you to jump in at any point.
Questions, anyone? No, you can proceed.
Okay. I don't want to bore you, but this is the stuff that makes me. Changes in taxable assessment within a tax class. So what we've got in the report, the very first table that we have, is the change within each tax class. So from 21 to 22, we see that residential assessment has increased by almost 58 million. And we see that industry has increased by 45 million. So, you know, in a numbers game, let's basically say that each property class has increased relatively the same. In terms of the residential tax class, it's a 22% increase in the number. You know, we started with 267 million. We're adding 58 million to it. But when you look at industry, 1.2 billion and adding 45 million to it is only a 4% increase. So we first realize that our residential tax base has climbed higher relative to our industrial tax base. So that's our first shift that we see. Then we take a look at the next shift and we talk about it in terms of that one growing more than the other, the relativity, and they're disproportionate. We see that in 2021, 16% of the total assessment was made up by the residential, and it's increased by 2%. That 2% is a drop from industry. We've gone from 75% of our taxes being paid by industry to that same 2% now being transferred to the residential. So that's our second twist. Our third twist comes to us with the classifications within the residential tax class. So vacant residential is exactly that. It's a vacant piece of property that is in Fort Nelson or in the Northern Rockies, and it has seen a very small decrease, but relative, it's a 7% decrease. Our large increase is the single family residential. So the bulk of 59 million is an increase, 28% strictly in residential. ALR, farm, and other residential have small decreases and a 2% increase in strata. As we dig deep within, what we've been able to identify is mobile homes on average. The assessment for mobile homes on average has gone up by 40%. So we've viewed VC assessment information that's being published out there that says that we may have a 20% increase, but we're seeing individual classes going up by much more than that. And certainly our largest shift in single family. It was very interesting that strata properties haven't moved. And so when we talk about that shift within that 28%, we dug a little deeper, and we've got, out of 1,142 properties that we've reviewed, we have 34 properties that have got an assessment increase greater than 70%. One property topped out at 99% increase. 10% of these properties are between 50 and 69% increase in their assessment. So it doesn't necessarily relate to a 50 or 60% increase in their taxes, but it does relate to an increase in taxes. So what we did then is we said, we need to understand where the assessment is going to take us if we were to levy the very same amount that we levied in 2021. So we need to pick a number. We know what our property tax distribution was in 2021. So we took that same value and we played it out into 2022 into a sample. And what we're seeing is that we've got all of those shifts playing into the mix. We would have a $215,000 increase for our residential class, and that's 17%. But to drop industry by 86,000 is only 0.5% impact on industry. So we're seeing that on the industry side, it will be very minimal. On business, there is a 6% substantial decrease. And on the residential side, we're seeing that there's a significant shift upwards.
So just to be clear, the assessment or the tax levy for 2021 on a value of $267,520,212 was this $1.270 million. And
Yes.
now we're saying that the taxes levied on the $325 million worth of residential is going to be 1.485. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And so if we think about that just for a minute, you haven't increased the number of people or the number of properties in that residential sector that are going to be paying taxes. So if we were proposing a tax levy that was equal to the 2021, we need to have a number so that we can have a discussion. We would be spreading over $200,000 over those same individuals. Now, the amount isn't the same. So that's why the previous table in terms of the 1,142 tax rolls is important. Vacant land had no increase. Mobile homes will see a 40% increase in their assessment. So it will be a disproportionate sharing of that 215,000 if that was to be the 2022 tax levy. We know that our homeowners and our residents in the Northern Rockies are concerned. They're all receiving their assessment. It's generally positive when your assessment goes up because it reflects that the value of your home has gone up. But that may not be the case in every instance. And we also in the report want to make sure that we outline the recourse for property owners. So BC Assessment has got a PARP complaint appeal process where they encourage individuals to call BC Assessment and have a conversation about their assessment to see if there might have been something overlooked, first of all. And if they aren't successful in having their questions addressed, there is an appeal process. And individuals have got until January 31st to lodge those appeals. With a very large portion of British Columbia receiving increased assessments, I would imagine that the individuals in their offices are very busy right now. So
Are there any
that-
questions for Mrs. Pike? Hearing none, Mrs. Pike?
Okay. So that brings me to the end of the report itself. And I was going to turn it over to CAO Barry for a comment or two around potential mitigation or lack thereof. And actually, Scott, I see that you're eating, so
That's okay.
you're good?
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Barry?
So well, I guess if it's important, we wanted to give enough time for council to have a discussion regards to this. So that's the reason for the special meeting, and thanks for the information, Tony, to have some dialogue. We've chatted about this and discussed it in previous budget meetings in terms of that pendulum swing and who pays what share of the tax levy. And it's something that we've talked about in terms of what was potentially up and coming, which there was such a dip in the residential assessment a number of years ago that there was significant taxation breaks, for lack of better terms, for the residential homeowner that was picked up by industry at the time. We haven't seen a significant increase in industry over the years, and actually it was interesting to see that there was an actual increase in assessment this year, because the double-edged sword approach is having, we expect industry to continue to decline potentially, especially major industry when you're talking to Bush, possibly. I mean, well, we all hear the rumors and the potential of things and potential gas flowing and whatnot. At the end of the day, I mean, that would be wonderful to happen, but the expectation is that we would continue to see a gradual decline in the industry assessment. And if other things happen, i.e. we talked about if a mill were to open within the community, forestry to take, whatever that might be, that would obviously positively impact. And as Tony said, I mean, the negative side is increase in residential values. Potentially would have your tax, your required taxes go up. The positive side is the value of your home and your property go up. But what we're seeing now, of course, is what we've talked about over the years is that pendulum swing where that share of the tax levy is starting to, the pendulum starting to swing more over to where we saw the last time I think we talked about today, we saw the residential assessment at where it is today was about 2018. 2018, the actual overall residential assessment. But the difference then is the overall assessment was over $100 million more, right? So it comes down to that share, right? The highest, I think we looked back and saw the residential assessment was 14 or 13, 14, I believe we looked today, somewhere around there. Yeah. But again, in the industry was quite high at the time. So what we're seeing now is that 72% of the tax levy would be paid by the by industry, and seen a drop. So in terms of mitigating, I mean, the reality is that from a process perspective, you look at reduce service levels and reduce what the actual tax levy required is. But again, I'll be honest, the amount that you would have to reduce it to, say, if you were to, that discussion that occurred a number of years ago where it was reduce the levy to a point where people don't pay the same or less than the year before. From a tax perspective, we're in the $8.5 million range. I mean, almost half of what our levy is, just to put a scale to it. Other options is potentially, you can look at potentially looking at increasing revenues, service areas, water, sewer, landfill, and stuff. But that will actually impact the resident even more and the locals even more, because the reality is that a lot of the costs associated with those foreign services are actually picked up through general taxation, and 72% has picked up in industry. So, I mean, those are the challenges right now with the levy. And of course, the levy, and chatting with the mayor earlier today, the levy has actually remained relatively stagnant over the years. I mean, if you look at increases in costs to operate, and we've chatted before, costs of operating continue to go up, but the levy we've left, I mean, it's been, you'd be hard pressed to probably find another community that continues to provide the same level of service, and in many cases more, because each year there's some little snippets, I'll call it service creep. Council asks us do this, let's look at this, let's add this. When you look at that, commendable job, I think, from a financial perspective in regards to where the existing levy is compared to years prior. So the reality is, the unfortunate reality is the unintended consequences of your property going up as Tony said, at a disproportionate rate versus the other classes, then that's when you see that increase. And that's where we're with today. And obviously, the community, the assessment showed up last week. We've all been impacted one way or another that way. And our role is to communicate the best we can to communicate, what we have control over. You don't have control of the assessment. If you feel your assessment is not fair or whatnot, then of course the link is in the report and the opportunity for people to appeal it. But the reality is that this is the kind of the hand we're dealt when it comes to the assessment currently, and the potential good news story. We all want our properties to continue to grow. The unintended consequence or the unfortunate reality is that has the potential to swing that pendulum unless we see industry numbers from an assessment perspective go up. So
Councillor Gerwing.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Sorry I was late, and so you might have already addressed this question. Sorry, I got two dogs that are coming to give me some love here. So throughout the years, we have reduced the ratio for business to lower the business rate, which then put a little bit more pressure on the residential rate. And given that and maybe I missed this part of it, but given that I think the way I'm reading it is the residential rates assessment rates have increased greater than the business rates have. Are we interested in addressing the ratio between industry, business, and residential rate, changing that ratio, as we have done in previous years when the assessment we felt unequal towards business?
Sure. I can
Mr. Barry?
address that.
Oh, go ahead, Mrs. Pike.
Yep. Sure, not a problem. Thank you for your question. We have changed the business multiplier from 3.0 to 2.9 back in 2014 or 2015. So it had gone down by 0.1 at that point in time. We haven't changed it since. We also are held by our ordering council to the multiplier of 3.3 for our industries and utilities. So certainly there is the ability to change the multiplier.
Mr. Barry?
Well, that was part of I shouldn't have going to be part of my discussion. The other option council could have that could sway that pendulum would be if council wished, is the only multiplier you can change is in fact the business multiplier, one way or another. And it did go from 3 to 2.9 2 years ago. And if you look at the table on the bottom of the admin report, when you look at what that assessed value looks at for that's the distribution of the taxes, you see that the residential has gone up 215 and business has gone down 129. But obviously there's lots for council to consider there, because of course business is not necessarily hasn't been great in some areas of the community for a number of years, and of course the pandemic has affected that even more. So it's a challenging discussion to have. But in terms of what does council have control over, that is something that you do have the ability to adjust if you so choose and wish to look at, which is obviously up to your discretion.
I think before we got into a discussion about how much to change the business multiplier, I think we need to take a look at the budget when it comes forward and what the municipality spending is, and give some thought to, some of the challenges businesses have faced, and whether we want to increase that tax burden on businesses to benefit residents. I know when I drive around, the number of buildings that are vacant and the challenges that a lot of businesses are facing in the municipality. They're not particularly in good shape, and I would be hard pressed to make a case as to why we should increase the tax to businesses. And but as things develop here and we see how much our budget is and what the impact is going to be on business, maybe things will change. But I do notice a lot of vacancies in commercial space, and I don't notice a very robust business atmosphere in Fort Nelson. Mr. Barry.
So just to comment in terms of the budget piece, and we'll chat about some timelines in terms of delivering the budget. Initial indications, we don't expect to see a significant increase in the tax levy required. We always try to hold the line, but of course each year it becomes more challenging. But we also have done things over the years financially that we've last year, for example, created the financial stabilization fund to help offset any peaks or anything that might drive that up. So we've done things in the past to help try to do what we can to kind of flatten that tax levy. So that said, that's the reason why I also want to comment in terms of when you look at the change in that percentage of who pays what their share, for lack of better words, of the levy, a significant reduction would have to occur to see any major impacts on the residential side. And, I'll throw the number we looked at. It was about 8.5 million to reduce to in the levy, which is a number that's to put it bluntly, it basically means we don't do our contribution for the capital for the IDC agreement this year, and we shut the rec center down. Essentially, that's when you add 5 million for operating the rec center and 3.5 for contribution to capital, right? Just to put it to perspective. And out of that number, $6.1 million would go back into industry, because if they're paying 72% of the levy, you're going to save 72% of whatever you save too. So all things to consider, and of course, councils, I'm sure, well aware of this. We've had many discussions over the past about this, and that's where that's the way the numbers kind of land.
Councillor Souls.
I'll give some of my perception of the trail that we followed as a community on this and why, or what I see going on. It's really interesting to think back to those days when we did change the multiplier in order to help business. That was actually before the free fall in the housing values in Fort Nelson, if you remember. And so we actually gave business a bit of a boost, so that it would, because it was definitely needed for survival's sake. And then the residential was not changed, except for the values were changed by BC assessment. So if you recall, we had a 30% loss one year and a 33% loss the next year and a 12% loss the subsequent year. That is where the residential taxes came down to where they were way below normal. And of course, the share that they were paying of the overall picture was definitely reduced. It's hard to, though, like in a sense, it's hard to rationalize changing anything, because this is actually just very natural. And so I think the way to, this is a very logical assessment that has come out. It's actually logical on another level. I think the fact that business has suffered more in the last couple of years than individuals, because many of our local individuals have had CERB to lean on, and that actually brought a lot of revenue or cash into our systems. And I realize I don't know who all had it, and I'm not saying that. I just know that there are many people in our community that also took advantage of that service that came. And so to think that we can leave our residentials at that low of a assessment rate is not living in the real world. And comparatively, like we still look, you see a 17% increase in residential value right now. What if they actually applied a comparative in there to other communities elsewhere? You want to see a multiplier, it's going to be a lot more than 17%. And so I see this as a gradual easing from a residential perspective that has benefit of increased value for homes. I mean, increased value of our assets. But I know that it will hurt some people for sure and the optics are difficult for people to stomach when they see the residential have to carry 17%. And when it used to carry a lot less than that, or not carry 17%, but have a 17% increase. So I think that we've tweaked, like we have worked historically to tweak that multiplier to try to help each particular sector balance out. But this is a step that was on it, that was going to happen regardless of what we do. This is going to happen.
So Mrs. Pike, if we change the commercial rates so that we got an extra dollar from the commercial, that would only translate into about 25 cents reduction in the residential. Is that correct? And it would be a 75-cent reduction to the industrial. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think so.
Okay.
I was, so for every dollar that we move somewhere else into business, 73 cents of that dollar will come from industry.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Is there anything further on this? Okay. Moving on, I'll ask for a motion, please, that we move to a,
I'm sorry,
Oh.
there's a couple more things specific to the
Sure.
budget. If we're done with.
Oh, go ahead.
Just, if we're done with the discussion on the assessment piece, we just have in front of you
Oh,
just
yeah.
to discuss the budget schedule preparation, just to throw some dates out there to see if there's any major conflicts, because it's coming like a freight train here, and so we figured to we take the opportunity right now to have a discussion. So I'll just hand it over to Erin and she can kind of walk through that schedule you have in front
Sure,
of
I
you.
just handed out just a really quick handout with just some key dates on it. These are not our dates that these things must occur. These are dates that we would like to have that item completed by. So we'd like to have the first draft or the preliminary budget in front of council by January 28th. So that is currently printing this week. So we will have it to you with some time to review. So we would be looking to meet with council sometime the week of January 24th to the 28th. Okay. Once we have council's blessing to proceed to public consultation with that version of the budget, we'll begin preparing our documentation for an open house. We are planning for the best case, and also knowing that we could be stuck with a virtual open house, but we are planning for an in-person open house. And we'd like to have that conducted by February 11th. That gives us plenty of time to have the comments back to council during the regular on February 21st. Then council has some time to review that, provide staff with their direction on any budget amendments. Then we would go to final prior to March 15th. And just for your information, March 15th, that's like a Tuesday. The end of that week is the start of spring break. So school district goes to spring break on March 21st. So our goal would to have the final budget in front of council the week before spring break.
Since Councillor Roper is in Prince Rupert, is there going to be an issue getting him a hard copy of this in time?
No
Okay.
issue. We can courier that, not a problem. And just for reference, also Easter this year is quite late. It's the second weekend in April, so we're not bumping up against Easter at all. So
Okay.
Plus, we'll also have Acting Director of Finance Pike on site from mid-February to the end of hopefully the final budget adoption.
Oh, that's good news. Coming back to the Enchanted Kingdom.
It will
So
be
if
a
any-
pleasure.
So if any member of council has any significant conflicts for those weeks that we've mentioned, if you could just let us know, we'll start to send out potential dates for presentation. We thought for presentation purposes in terms of timing and chunks, we would do a medium length of time, probably over a couple of meetings. We didn't want to do a bunch of 1 hours. We also didn't want to do 1 8 hour. So we're going to meet in the middle. if that's-
So is council okay with when we do that final presentation to council, similar to what we've done the past couple of years, not 1 hour per day, but break it up over a couple of days or similar during the week?
Good with me.
Like a noon meeting. So we're not there yet, of course. We'll discuss it maybe a little closer and propose, final times and whatnot. But if council's okay with that, that's what we'll plan for now.
Good. Is there anything else?
Not unless council has any questions or any comments specific to the budget.
Anything more? Very well. I'll ask for a motion that the meeting be closed pursuant to section 91A(k) of the community charter. Personal information about an individual being considered for a position and negotiations and discussions regarding municipal service. They're at the preliminary stage and could harm the municipality if were made public. Can I get that motion, please? Moved by Councillor Soul, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. I'll recall the special regional council meeting to order. Ms. McIver, could you do the reporting of those motions, please?
Certainly. So moved by Mayor Foster, seconded by Councillor Souls, that regional council support the public engagement of the BC Caribou Recovery and Protection Plan, carried unanimously. And the second resolution was moved by Councillor Gerwing, seconded by Councillor Penny, that council instructs staff to move forward with a process to have a socioeconomic study done on the Caribou Recovery Plan draft scenario 3.25 as presented by the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development on December 13th, carried unanimously.
Thank you. Can I get a motion, please, to adjourn the special regional council meeting? Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried, and we are adjourned. Thank you.